from Meade County. Adam Edelin, Democrat, loses. Jeff Young loses of Lexington. Rocky Atkins, Mr. Kentucky, Mr. Free Community College, loses. William E. Woods, Republican, loses. Ike Lawrence, Republican candidate for governor of Kentucky, loses. Robert Goforth loses. Andy Beshear wins. He's going to face off Matt Bevin in November. And both Andy Beshear and Matt Bevin will have to beat John Hicks, the Libertarian candidate. Will Schroeder, Republican candidate for Attorney General, loses. Daniel Cameron wins. He's a pretty face with dark money, vicious dark money background. He's going to run against Greg Stumbo in November. Financial expert, insurance salesman Josh Mers loses. And Gloman Bowman wins. He's going to have to run against Allison Ball, the Republican incumbent, in November. Kentucky Secretary of State Steve Nipper loses. Andrew English loses. Carl Nett, nothing but net, shoots an air ball. Jason Belcher loses. Jeff Sebestia loses. Jason Griffith loses. Heather French Henry wins. And Michael G. Adams wins. They'll run against each other in November. Auditor of Kentucky. Kelsey Coots of the Kentucky United 120 loses. Chris Tobey, Kentucky Fried Pensions author, loses. And Sherry Donahue wins. She's taking on the military-industrial complex. She's going to run against Mike Harmon in November. Joe Trigg wanted to legalize medical marijuana, loses. And Robert Conway wins. He'll have to run against Ryan Quarles for Agricultural Commissioner in November. Now, I was under the impression that there were 4 judges races. Well, actually, first, on the primary day, May 21st, 2019, the Fayette County Clerk's website crashed. And not only is that just bad for the statewide election, but they had a specific judge election for them, too. The Circuit Judge 22nd Judicial Circuit 4th Division. This was a Fayette County-only election. And Julie Muth Goodman won 55% of the vote, beating John Reynolds, Todd S. Page, Tommy Todd, and Steve Stadler. So Julie Muth Goodman trounced all of her opponents, beating her second-place opponent by more than double. Circuit Court Judge, Family Court 35th Judicial Circuit 3rd Division. And I want to say that this is in Pike County. Yeah, Justin Corey Hamilton. So Justin Corey Hamilton of Elkhorn beat Robert Lee Cheney of Pikeville, Eugene Cisco of Pikeville, and Kenton Varney of Pikeville. So this is for the family court, the Circuit Judge Family Court of Pike County. And then the other 2 judge races, one was between Bradley S. Butler of Hardinsburg and Beth Constant Ratley of Litchfield, Grayson County. So there were 2 elections. There was an appellate election, too, of the 3rd District, Division 1, Judge of the Court of Appeals with 27 different counties between Michael O. Caperton of London and Jacqueline M. Caldwell of Cox's Creek. So those elections, apparently, they weren't on the Secretary of State website, so I think what's going on with them is they are just primaried in so that nobody has to vote for them. There has to be something about maybe the top 2, I'm not for sure exactly, but there was nobody, I haven't found anything declaring any winner between Beth and Bradley. I did see on Ballotpedia how Michael and Jacqueline they're running against each other. Beth and Bradley isn't part of Ballotpedia, so Ballotpedia doesn't get all the elections. But Michael and Jacqueline is a part of Ballotpedia, and they had little green check marks right next to them as if they both won the primary, and therefore they're going to run against each other in the November election. So that's what I'm going to assume is going to happen to all four of these candidates for the 46th District, 1st Division, the District Judge race of Beth Rattley and Bradley Butler, and then the Judge of the Court of Appeals with Michael Caperton and Jacqueline Caldwell. So those are all the elections. That's who all won, and that's who all lost. And the voters in Marion, Kentucky, I believe it's a small town, you had 403 who voted yes, 277 who voted no. There was one initiative in the whole state of Kentucky, and it went to Marion, Kentucky, a city, and they approved alcohol sales. So now, if you live in Marion, Kentucky, you're allowed to go buy a Budweiser and then take it home and then drink it. So moving on up, right? That's progressive. That's a good thing. So that also happened in Kentucky on May 21st, 2019, too. The last thing that I want to make a comment about is Kentucky's turnout rate. It's worse than Venezuela's. It always has been. Venezuela, Jimmy Carter says it's got the best election, the best democracy in Venezuela. So just picking out one, but you could just go down the line and pick out a whole bunch of them. Usually the presidential elections, Kentucky will inch up closer to 50%, but in the gubernatorial, the governor's race, it was 30% in 2015, 30%. So it's still 70% of the bulk of the people's not showing up, and it's not 50% plus one, which would make it a legitimate democracy. It's not a legitimate democracy unless you have 50% plus one. That means the majority of the people didn't show up. So the majority of Kentuckians don't show up to their elections, whereas the majority of Venezuelans do. So let's just take a look at the turnout rate for May 21st, 2019 primary. So you have 3,421,796 Kentuckians who are registered to vote. So 3.4 million Kentuckians who are registered to vote. Out of those 3.4 million, 658,976 Kentuckians voted. So that's substantially smaller. That's only 19.26%. 19.26%, okay? So that's, we'll use that number, but there's been less. 13% was 4 years ago. The 2015 primaries had a 13% turnout rate. So 19.26% is better than 4 years ago. It's also better than the 12.5% that they had predicted. But it's still 19.26%. So that's disgustingly abysmal. The democracy of Kentucky is broken. So you have just breaking down the numbers, right? Out of the Democrats, 394,490 Democrats voted and 259,854 Republicans voted. That's a difference of 134,636 more Democrats. So there are more Democrats than Republicans who had voted in the primary. So if the primary would have been the general election, then Andy Beshear would be the governor. That's assuming that the political party would vote for their own candidate. So you have 5 million souls, right? 3.4 million is how many registered voters are in Kentucky. And in 1 year, the 2020 census says there's going to be 5 million souls. So that's, about 1.5 million that's not registered to vote. So where's that 1.5 million? They're not even registered, right? So we're picking on just the registered voters, but there's 5 million people in Kentucky. Only 3.4 are registered. So that's 1.6 million who are not registered. Now, you have more Democrats than Republicans, and out of the 3.4 million total registered voters in Kentucky, only, 658,976 voted. So that means 2.762820. 2,762,820 Kentuckians didn't vote. So out of the registered voters, so you had, 1.5 million who aren't even registered, and then you got 2.8 million in round numbers. 2.8 million of the Kentucky people did not vote. 650,000 Kentuckians did vote. 2.8 million of the registered voters didn't vote, and then you could probably tack on the 1.6 million. Yeah, sure, some of them are kids, but I bet you at least, 60%, 75% of that 1.6 million Kentuckians who are not registered to vote. I bet you they can. I bet you they can be, registered. They're just not doing it. So 650,000 Kentuckians voted out of, 3.4 million. So 2.8 million Kentuckians didn't vote. 1.5 million are not registered for whatever reasons. So 2.8 million, 80% of the Kentucky people, 80% of the registered people. So it's probably more. 80% of the registered Kentuckians didn't come out to vote, so probably more, right? 85, 90%. So 90% of the 18 and over crowd. Anybody over 18 years of age? Millions? 2.8 million, 3 million. We didn't even get 1 million voters, but 3 million stayed home. So 80%, 90% of the Kentucky people are not voting. To be a democracy, you need the people. The demos. Democracy is, demos, the people. But the demos didn't show up. The Kentucky people stayed sitting comfortably on their fat asses, and they didn't participate in the republic whatsoever. So Kentucky got to use it or lose it. Use it or lose it, Kentucky. I mean, are you kidding me? What is it? And then for the last thing, okay, if you're not appalled by that, there's not a majority. 80% of Kentucky didn't vote, maybe 90%. Over, 2.8 million, probably over 3 million people did not vote. Meanwhile, 650,000 did. So let's compare it to Venezuela. We're in Venezuela. Our government, the U.S. government is in Venezuela right now because the democracy sucks. They're not listening to the Constitution. Juan Guaido is the real president, even though, he's just a congressman and he's never ran for president, and he's, handpicked by the Chicago boys and the American government. Oh, yeah, hey, that guy in the crowd right there, he's the president, right? Just picking anybody. In 2013, Maduro had an election. He barely won his election, 51% to 49%, razor-thin margin, just like Matt Bevin's victory in the Republican primary 2015. He won by 83 votes. And then Baby Beshear's victory in 2015, November general election, was razor-thin too. So both Baby Beshear barely got to become the Attorney General of Kentucky, and Matt Bevin barely got to become the governor. So the turnout rate of that April 14th, 2013 Venezuelan election for Maduro was 80%. 80%. Kentucky had 19.2 whatever percent. So 19% compared to 80%. Venezuela actually has a functioning democracy. Their democracy is working. They're listening to their constitution. Every problem that you can point out with Venezuela, you can point out in the United States too. What, he's ruling by decree, like the executive orders? What, there's poor and hungry people over there? Oh, you mean like in every goddamn city in America? And then, there's poverty all over the place. So you're going to sit there and tell me that we need to go into Venezuela because they don't know how to do democracy. 80% of them voted. 80% is above 50%, so they have democratic legitimacy. They have beat the 50% plus one margin. I mean, it's just one election, but it's 2013, and 80% of the Venezuelan people voted in that election. That is so democratically legitimate, it's not even funny. That means the whole country came out and voted, but with Kentucky, well, you can't say that. You can't say all of Kentucky came out to vote. All you can say is just 1 out of 5. The registered voters came out to vote. Only 1 out of 5 came out to vote. And then they picked the winner who was, even less of a percentage, 4%. So you're going to have 4% dictate. So those 4% go out to vote. And then who they vote for is who they get, so they get to choose who the victor is in this so-called democracy. And then I guarantee you when those victors win, they'll sit there and say that they got the mandate of the entire people. Oh, yeah, because you got 4%, you got a 4% mandate, so that, therefore you actually won as if you were Maduro. You're not Maduro, Andy Beshear. You're not Maduro, Matt Bevin. You ought to have less democratic legitimacy than Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela. His election had 80% turnout rate. This election had, didn't even break 20%. God, I won 21.2% of my vote, so in 2015. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say Kentucky's democracy sucks. Venezuela's democracy, Colorado's democracy kicks the shit out of Kentucky's democracy's ass. It's not even a close call. It's not even close. And so Kentucky has, about 300 years back when it comes to really a lot of things, but definitely when it comes to their elections. So the turnout rate was abysmal, 19.26% versus 80%. Venezuela's doing better. If anybody needs the U.S. government to coup d'etat them, it's Kentucky. And so if you're against military intervention, right, it's okay to do that crap in Venezuela, but, somebody is complaining about, hey, don't make us vote. Don't make us vote. Well, what if there was a, U.S. government invasion, destabilization effort, and then instead of Matt Bevin being the governor, Trump went ahead and just picked somebody else, that Alvarado guy. He just says, nah, he won. I know he was a lieutenant governor and he didn't really run for governor. Or maybe pick Goforth, right? That would be more comparable. So he picks Goforth. Oh, this guy is actually the governor. Why? Well, he ran and he got some votes, and you know what? He's more our guy. He's. Would you accept that kind of democracy? That's perfect analogy. So you're going to get all pissed off and be like, hey, you're going to fine me if I don't vote? Would you rather have a military invasion? Because that's what the U.S. government is doing right now in the name of freedom and democracy in Venezuela. Now, it's all bullshit. It's because of socialism and oil and hegemony. It's about power. It has nothing to do with, doing what's right for the Venezuelan people. But Kentucky's, democracy sucks. It sucks, and it sucks worse in Venezuela and worse in Colorado. So really, Kentucky should look at Venezuela and Colorado as a model of which to improve to.